Hello, BookTube. Well, it's happened again. This channel hit 7.4 thousand subscribers, hot on the heels of reaching 7.3 thousand subscribers. And every time we hit a mark that has 2 zeros in it, God forbid 3 zeros in it, we do a Q&A. So I put out a call for questions. Every time I do this, I assume that the well for questions will have run dry. I am not that interesting, but nevertheless, I have the rad pad here, and we got a lot of great questions. So once again, I'm going to go through these. I keep in mind one main caveat, which is that I bulk ported all of these questions over from the comment section of the video where I requested them into a document that I could work on to edit out the posted one day ago stuff and the read more stuff and the YouTube comment style prompts that I would otherwise read out loud, and also to make notes if I needed any, although this batch I didn't need much in the way of notes. So during that bulk porting process, your question may have been lost. If so, I greatly apologize. I am not dodging you. Feel free to ask your question again, either to me personally, on my email. I leave my email on every video, or to just post the question again when we do another one of these Q&As in about a week. So that having been said, we're going to start out. Once again, I'm going to hold myself to discrete blocks of time so rather than do this all in one video. So the first question is from Trip. It's actually a few questions. How do you balance patriotism with being ashamed or embarrassed at the current political climate of your country? Well, nothing like starting off with an easy question. It's really, really difficult if you're an American, much less a patriotic American, as I am. I love this country. It's really, really difficult to do that in the present state of affairs, because one man has caused the United States to be not only an internal disaster, but an international laughingstock. One man has done this. He couldn't have done it without the completely supine cooperation of an entire branch of government, an entire House of Congress, the Senate, the U.S. Senate, which is run by Republicans, will let this racist, sexist, fascist, lying moron, who I know does not represent a lot of them, simply speak for them. They won't check him. They won't remove him from power. They had the ability to do that months ago, in which case 160,000 Americans who are dead right now would still be alive. They didn't do it. They didn't remove him from power. If you take away the spider-fragile, raving, litigious egomaniac at the center of the United States government right now, then what you're left with is Mike Pence, who is just an ordinary, hypocritical, bottomlessly corrupt, bigoted, white politician, but not a lunatic. And if Trump had been removed from office legally, it could easily have been done. It didn't even need to go to an impeachment trial. It could have been done before that. If the Republicans in the U.S. Senate had simply gone to him and said, enough's enough, resign, or we will stand aside for when the Democrats impeach you. But if they had done that, if they had removed him from office for the obviously illegal, for the obvious crime of colluding with a foreign government to win election and get dirt on a foreign opponent, all of which was amply proved by the Mueller report and amply proved by the Democratic investigation of the whole affair, over and over again proven. If the Republican Congress, if the Republican Senate had done that, had removed him, instead of sitting back, crossing their arms and saying, I don't see anything, then Mike Pence would have been president when the pandemic struck America. And you can say what you want about Mike Pence. I can say a lot. He is a monster. The bland-faced ones always are. But he would have listened to the science. Obviously, he would have done what any sane person would have done, what every other sane governmental leader has done. He would have listened to the science. He would have listened to the doctors. He would have known from the beginning, acknowledged from the beginning, this was an enormous deal. Not a little trivial thing, a few people on a passenger ship, but an enormous potential threat. He would have paid attention to the intelligence briefings he'd received from the best intelligence agencies in the world, telling him what a huge potential damage this could do. And he would have acted accordingly. And as a result, the United States would not currently be banned from the rest of the world. So it's a little difficult to muster that patriotism in the face of a lunatic in the Oval Office and a supine Republican majority in the Senate. have the power. They have the power to change all of this, and they're just not doing it. And the reason they're not doing it is purely ideological. They can't stand Trump. They hate him. Except for a tiny handful of extra special lunatics that think he's the Messiah. But most of them hate him. The only reason that they are just laying down for anything that he does, no matter how horrible it is, no matter how egregious it is because he's getting them what they want. And the main thing they want is a whole legal apparatus in America, all of the circuit courts and the Supreme Court, that will finally put women barefoot and back in the kitchen where they belong. That is what Republicans want. And they know perfectly well the long game is that the way to get that is to make the laws of the country reflect that, so that it is legal for your employer to discriminate against you on the basis of you being a woman, because we don't want women to have jobs. We want them to be back at home having kids and being housemakers. So that it is illegal under any circumstances to have an abortion at any stage of your pregnancy. So that maybe we could take a look at voting rights. Maybe we could do that. That is what this Republican majority in the Senate want. They want a legal superstructure in America that will allow them to create a country that reflects the balance of the sexes in the Bible. And they need Trump to do that. They need any Republican to do that. And that's why they do it. And that's why they lay along with him, and that makes it difficult. Oddly enough, although I'm no big fan of public chaos, because I'm a student of history, and public chaos can tip into the end of a country overnight. So I'm no big fan of it. But even so, oddly enough, because of that supine Republican majority in the Senate, the thing that has stirred the most patriotism in me in the last few months has been protests in the streets. So let's move on to your second question. We're only on one question. Let's go to the second of Tripp's questions, and hope that it's a little easier. What do you think of the writing advice as given by Strunk and White? Do you worry that it limits the expressive aspect of writing and is a bit dull? Well, okay. Those of you might not know what Tripp is talking about. There's a manual called Strunk and White. It's very famous, sold billions of copies. It's a largely American thing, but I bet it's sold a lot overseas as well. And it's a little prescriptive handbook, the perfect size for students to carry around, the perfect thing for teachers to say, all right, I know there are all kinds of variations on style books under the sun. For this class, we're going to go with Strunk and White because it's easy, it's readily available, and it's small, it's short. You can get through it and master it. And as such, it serves an important function, one that I might point out American schools don't serve anymore, which is to create a kind of baseline. You need a baseline. Absolutely you do. When you say that it limits expressive aspects of writing and is a bit dull, well, that's true. But that's what a baseline should be. There isn't. If you have a yen to write, if your imagination, your inspiration, is bursting at the seams, then you will exceed Strunk and White readily. It will not dampen you. It will not hurt you at all. It's encouraging to writers in its own staid, buttoned-down way. It's encouraging to writers. But if you are an aspiring writer, lots of inspiration, lots of imagination, lots of hope and energy, the fire in your belly and all that sort of stuff, and you don't have the basics that are imparted by Strunk and White or Wilson Follett or whoever, you're drastically behind the eight ball. And it shows in the current crop of 21st century contemporary fiction, especially by young authors. It shows. The things that when I get their advanced reading copies, when I get their review copies of their debut novel, or a second novel, or a third novel, God help us all, and I find grammatical, syntactical, and even spelling mistakes, I am no longer willing to say that's a copy editor asleep at the job. I mean, it is. But I'm more willing to attribute those to the author simply not knowing the basics of their own language. So Strunk and White is very important. Something like Strunk and White is very important, especially since, as I mentioned, you're not getting it in school. In grammar schools in large parts of this country anyway, America, the United States, the teachers don't know the difference between a gerund and a participle. They don't have any idea of that. And if they're too doctrinarian teaching it, they could be sued. Because who says that, that little Billy doesn't want to make a certain particle of speech behave the way he likes it instead of the way you do. So let's go on to your next question here. Get the rad pad to behave. Oh, the rad pad is not behaving. Okay, well, it doesn't matter. Let's see here. Third question. What are your thoughts on Leon Trotsky as a historical figure? I heard he was a talented writer. I think he is a talented writer, but I don't. He largely bores me. Just everybody in his time was a talented writer. And then question number 4. Is there any way for your loyal flock of DONA-Huguenots? Is the collective for DONA-Huguenots a flock? Flock is already taken, right? Flock is already a collective for something else. What should be the collective word for DONA-Huguenots? A Frida? Perhaps. Is there any way your loyal flock of DONA-Huguenots can view your sacred texts, such as the one about the Trojan War or the recent... What Trip is referring to here as my sacred texts are the books that I have written. I will occasionally mention on this channel that I have written books. I have love the experience of writing a book. Not a short story, not flash fiction, but a whole book, constructing it and then working it out and then reaching that glorious point where you're on the sleigh ride to the end, and then the end. Oh my God. Finishing the draft of a novel, bringing it onto a controlled landing on the landing strip an inch or two away from where you envisioned months ago is a feeling of exhilaration, the like of which I do not know. I have felt many kinds of exhilaration in my life. There's nothing to compare to it. Nothing. But as to the sacred texts themselves, well, the Trojan War novel is called Troy War. And it's not safe for work, I believe, is the euphemism these days. So I'm not sure how many of you would want to read it. It is full of viscera. My version of the Trojan... It's a novel. It's the story of the Trojan War in the form of a novel, and not the story of the Iliad, the story of the whole Trojan War, from the beginning to the end, from the apple to the fairest, all the way to the end. And it's very violent and very explicit. And the book before that was Optimus, a long historical novel about the Roman Emperor Trajan. And then I followed Troy War with a couple of other books for NaNoWriMo and elsewhere. And also I made Troy War the first part of a trilogy. So there's Troy War, that is the story of the Trojan War in the form of a novel. And then there's Steve Donoghue's Ulysses. Not James Joyce's Ulysses. The title of the book is Steve Donoghue's Ulysses. That's the sequel. And that is my novel version of the Odyssey. And then I finished it up with the Telemachiad, my epic about Odysseus' son. And who's a teen dream. And that was a sort of a hyperkinetic and extremely long-winded fusion of post-Homeric epics and gay fiction. And I've gone on from there. I've done a bunch of other things. The Trip mentions NaNoWriMo, and I do a project for NaNoWriMo every year, and I've recently taken to doing projects for Project NaNoWriMo, or Camp NaNoWriMo, which happens a couple of times a year. I just finished one, a little belatedly. I just finished I Work in Lethals, my project for Camp NaNoWriMo in July. But I write these things because I so much enjoy it, but I haven't really thought about editing them, hiring an editor to clean them up, and then formatting them, putting them out on, Amazon or whatever. I mean, I have thought about it, but I haven't gone beyond thinking about it. So I don't know. If the question is when, I don't know. But this is 13 minutes, and we just finished the first question, so I hope you have all of your laundry done. So question number 2 is from Jack Ivoniuk. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? one horse-sized duck. There's nothing you can do against a crowd. You're going to lose against a crowd, no matter what it is. It could be a crowd of small children. You're still going to lose. Also, what is your favorite Led Zeppelin song? Fool in the Rain. Michelangelo Enthusiast says, theoretically, if we were to have a break from reading and watch some TV, would you watch the Dick Cavett Show with me? Do you generally like Mr. Cavett? I would watch the Dick Cavett Show with you. Absolutely. It's a fantastic show. Fantastic. He is so good at doing what he does. And no one can do it. No one does it like him. All of the famous talk shows of the time, Merv Griffin, Michael Douglas, Dinah Shore, it was all carefully scripted. Just like the Late Show and the Late Show and the Tonight Show and all that stuff today is carefully scripted. The jokes, the surprise double takes, all that sort of stuff has been rehearsed a million times. Nothing that you see on those shows is spontaneous. I can think of only one thing that I'm even doubtful about. I wonder if maybe the actress Angie Harmon was on one of those shows and her fiance came on stage and surprised her by going down on one knee and proposing to her. And it looked to me like it was real. like that really was spontaneous. Like she'd gone through the same anecdote with the host, but without the proposal. But then again, although she's not known for anything except a couple of great seasons of Law and Order, Angie Harmon's a terrific actress, so she may have been able to pull that off. But Dick Cavett, he had note cards to remind him of some specifics about each guest. Try to do without that. Just try. It's hard to do without that. Even when you know the guest biography really well, it's still hard to do that, especially doing it one after another, filming, 5 of those in a week. He had note cards. And he had teleprompters for the clock counting down to when he had to go away to commercial, and he had patter for that. But if you watch, I'm sure there's plenty of Dick Cavett on YouTube that you can watch for free. And if you watch, you will see what I mean. A genuine mind at work the whole time. And a genuine wit, too. Dick Cavett could be funny off the top of his head, which is given to almost no hosts like that. Every once in a blue moon, I know Johnny Carson had a great reputation for being able to be funny off the top of his head, but it wasn't. It was all scripted. Every once in a blue moon, he could do it. But really, you'd have to go to his predecessor. You'd have to go to Jack Parr, somebody who could actually be legitimately funny on the cuff. And Dick Cavett could be. And boy, oh boy, the affect that he projected was of this, this reedy East Coast intellectual effete snob, a pushover, in other words. And he invited a lot of heavyweights onto his show. And I don't just mean literally, but also intellectually. He invited a whole bunch of bullies onto his show, male and female. And so many of them, if you watch his show, so many of those guests took one quick read of him and thought, oh, okay, I know what you are. And they were dead wrong. And the way they found it out is because they'd have knives in their back after 15 minutes. Or maybe they wouldn't even know the knife went in, but the audience would. The audience, Cavett had a great rapport with his audience. They could tell when he issued a merciless zinger to someone, often before the victim could tell. So it was misleading, very much so. Same thing with Bill Buckley on Firing Line. He could often present when he was lounging all the way back like this, and his one foot is crossed over his knee and it's bouncing in the air, and he's tapping his pen on his clipboard. He could easily give the impression of just this bloated patrician, totally Colonel Blimpish, out of his element thing, but he was paying razor sharp attention to what was being said, and sometimes he was just waiting to pounce, and sometimes his guests fell for it and fell right into the trap. But Dick Cavett, when this whole pandemic thing is over, if we can ever have a Steve Con, we will watch some Dick Cavett. That would be wonderful. Let's see here. John Pett, I seem to be in a talkative frame of mind, so this could be long. That's all right. John Petter says, I've recently taken to listening to and reading books at the same time, reading along to the audiobook. If that allows me to speed up to 3 times to match your speed, is that considered reading? I did it for Stephen Fry's Harry Potter and loved it. Oh my God. Reading is listening to a sped up version of an audiobook of the book while you're actually reading it with your eyes, that sounds horrifying. How can that possibly be enjoyable? Keep in mind, there's no such thing as cheating here, and there's no such thing as catching up here. You don't have to be as fast a reader as somebody else. That sounds like a horrifying way to read. Is that actually working for you? Well, I guess you said it did. You said you read Stephen Fry's Harry Potter that way and loved it. Okay. If it works for you, then that's the only thing you need to worry about. I would never do something like that myself. No way. That'd be like I don't know, reading a work in translation from the Russian while riding a bicycle. Barbells and Books, well-known troublemaker, asks 2 questions. We know by now that books don't make you cry, but could you name any novels that at least got you misty-eyed? Not particularly, no. They're all made-up stories. Why would I get misty-eyed at some tobacco addict in his converted garage, thinking, well, now I'm going to have this person do this? Well, when I walked into the garage this morning, I wasn't going to have them do that, but then I had a change of mind. Now I'm going to have them do this. And has a book ever made it to one of your end-of-the-year best lists, only for your opinion on it to change for the worse as time went on? Almost never. My opinion changed in the other direction often enough to keep me at least a little bit humble, where I will hate a book, hate an author, and then I'll go back to the book years later, and there will be more in it than I thought. But loving a book and then going back and realizing, oh no, that wasn't any good at all. That almost never happens. Thank God. That almost never happens. Joseph Coverley says, I would like your thoughts on some sci-fi fantasy writers. Terry Pratchett. I've always thought he was overrated. I know he's beloved, but his books just bore me. They're supposed to be funny and whimsical, and they don't do anything for me. Larry Niven. Well, he's hard science fiction, and it's very much on the hard emphasis on the hard rather than on the fiction. So I haven't found many of his books very enjoyable, even the ones that are such out there hard science fiction that they are acting more like thought experiments than anything else. He seems to me a very lead-footed writer. And Joe Abercrombie. Joe Abercrombie's great. He's fantastic. He knows exactly what he's doing and what he's not doing. Michael Jefferson says, What is it you like about John Quincy Adams? Did you ... meet him? Should we start with a big biography of him or just dive straight into his diaries? Oh no, I would start with biography. I'd start with a biography, yeah. There are thanks to the last 10 years, there are plenty of great biographies of him. You just pick one that came out in the last 10 years and read it. And if he strikes your fancy, you don't want to spend time with him in his diaries if you're not already interested in him. So I'd pick a big biography first. And the thing I like about him is that he brought himself to his job. He has the number one qualification that Steve usually likes in an American president, which is that he didn't live for he wasn't on fire with ambition. He didn't think he deserved to be president, in the sense of this is mine by right because I'm better than anybody else, and he was perfectly happy to leave it. And I like that in U.S. presidents, but also he wasn't an embarrassment. The president's job has nothing to do with policy. The presidency is about intangibles, and John Quincy Adams' intangibles line up really well. You can look them straight in the face. So I like him for a number of reasons. Oh God. Okay. Ami1649, Ami, Ivan's Nightmare, Piltdown Man 574, Electric Boogaloo. His channel's been known by all of these things and many more. He asks, if you found yourself on a glorious crusade to conquer the infidel and liberate the holy city of Jerusalem, and you had to pick a literary travel companion to join you on this perilous adventure, would you prefer to travel with James Boswell or Samuel Johnson, and why? I'm going to so my choice is between a syphilitic dipsomaniac or a gigantic, morbidly obese intellectual who could barely walk. Those are my choices to go into combat in the Holy Land. I think I prefer Robert Dodsley to either one of them. If we're talking about their contemporaries, I'd like somebody who can at least throw a punch. Anastasia B says, I know you do not like Stephen King, but are there any of his books that you thought were better than others? Well, generally speaking, his earlier books are better because he was still being edited. Salem's Lot has at least 60% a workable vampire novel. There are parts of different seasons that are fairly good, that are fairly coherent. It's only once he became a phenomenon and couldn't be edited anymore that he was left in the hands of his own talent, and I would maintain that he doesn't have any talent. So if you're left that way, you know what you're doing, Mr. King, so go right ahead and just submit it to the head of the publishing house. You, in your acknowledgments and in your writing books and your interminable boring lectures, you can refer to him as your editor, but he hasn't edited a book in 45 years. He's getting the latest book and saying, Steve, this is good stuff. Doesn't know anything about it at all. So early stuff maybe, but he's still a waste of your time. If you're thinking, okay, I have a soft spot for Stephen King, but I want critical approval. I want to mention two things. One, you're perfectly free. It's perfectly right, perfectly okay for you to read in your soft spot. Go right ahead. There are no rules here. There's no wrong way to do this. And B, there is no possibility of getting critical approval for Stephen King. He is a bad writer. He is just a bad writer. No matter what kind of treasured position he has in your reading development, for that, my hat's off to him. Him and a whole bunch of other, J.K. Rowling, a whole bunch of people of bad writers led people to be lifelong readers, and sometimes led them to be writers who will inevitably be better writers than their progenitors. That part, fine, absolutely. And of course, he's open-handedly generous to his city and to libraries and to literacy causes, fine, great. But there is no way to dig around in his early juvenilia and find an early Stephen King work that is critically good. None of his work is critically good. He's a bad writer. So, he's not alone. I'm not just picking on him, but he's the one that came up here. Mary Tumulty says, in terms of being a good storyteller, how would you rank Flannery O'Connor, Eudora Welty, Mary McCarthy, and Carson McCullers? I wouldn't rank them. They're all really good. Eudora Welty's probably the best of the four that are mentioned here. And a travel question. Did you cross Russia on the Trans-Siberia Railroad with pups? I did indeed. FEGH00T says, I think you've mentioned that you love The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. Who are some other German language authors that you really enjoy reading? Well, the big ones. You know, Hermann Brock, Robert Musil, Hermann Hesse. I like reading all of them. So the big ones. I don't profess to be any great shakes with the minutiae of German literature. Also a big fan of Mann's brother, of his writing too. I think it's better than it's billed to be. How are we doing for time? Oh my. Okay. Let's see here. Let's do one more. Rommel Martinez says, first question is, have you read Neil Gaiman's The Sandman? Yes, I have. If so, what are your thoughts? It's overrated. Moreover, what do you think of his body of work? It's overrated. Second question, I remember you mentioned that you have read Death Note. Yes. Have you read any other mangas? The only other one that I've read with any kind of consistency was Crying Freeman, and that was a long, long time ago. I'm sure that Crying Freeman is not made anymore. Specifically, the long-running manga series JoJo Bizarre Adventures. If not, it's a recommend. Okay, duly noted. I haven't read that. Duly noted. Great. All right, so we're going to stop with Rommel, and we will move on with the next video. So I will see you there.